Доброго ранку усім, хто сьогодні.
Good afternoon, dear guests. We start our work in Ukraine Crisis Media Center with an important and interesting topic, how to make anti-corruption code really efficient. Our guests are Iryna, Bekeshkina, Director of Ilko, Kucheriv Democratic Initiative Foundation, Mykhailo, Zhernakov, Director of DEJURE Foundation, Mykola, Khavroniuk, Expert Director for Research Development, Center for Political and Legal Reforms, Yaroslav, Yurchyshyn, Executive Director, Transparency International Ukraine. So I'm giving the floor to Iryna Bekeshkina. Good afternoon. Our topic is very important. It is very relevant and one of the key for the further development of our country. You will see the findings of sociological research, and you will see that within several years, when we see what are the problems which are most interest among the public, what problems need to be resolved, and which will demonstrate that Ukraine goes the right way. The problem number one is the war, but the same relevance is given to development of the economy, growth of the welfare, and coming of poverty and corruption problem. Corruption should be resisted and eradicated. 46% think that this would be an important signal that Ukraine goes the right way. Now only 16% think so among Ukrainian public. Whether combating corruption is successful, 80% think that it is not successful, and 46% think that it is an absolute fail. Only 2.5% think that this is quite successful field. Establishing of the anti-corruption court for many people is a dream. Maybe it is just very regular thought, because they think that the anti-corruption court will play a crucial role in contributing to the anti-corruption battles. I often think about Diamond prosecutor's case, who maybe many people have forgotten about, and also what happens in the case of Nasirov, when we are told that all courts should try anti-corruption cases, but in practice we can go and see to the automobile fleets of the judges, which are now occupy their positions. So anti-corruption court should become the tool of efficient combating corruption. The bill does not give grounds for experts they believe the trust in judges is at the lowest level in Europe and Ukraine, and it is even the lowest confidence in it is even lower than the trust in banks in Ukraine among the public respondents. If we return to our previous opinion poll, only 8% believe illustration of judges. This concerns anti-corruption court. We asked who you will have confidence to entrust this election of judges. There are two groups: experts of Western countries 41% and experts from anti-corruption NGOs 42% of respondents. We did not ask to say who is the key, but people mentioned only these two groups. 6% have confidence in MPs, 10% in judges, believe in judges. I have been working in sociology for a long time, and I believe that if we entrust establishing the anti-corruption court to judges, and if we assume that it will be formed in an unbiased manner, people will not believe, because people do not believe in judges absolutely. Who are most efficient, competent in the combat against corruption? 2% is given by respondents to the judges. So who are the most active? Mass media. People believe that among those who are most intensively combating corruption, they are mass media. 26% of respondents think so. Sometimes we say that just choose 3 of the options. Here we didn't say so. People could check all the options. 21% say the anti-corruption office, and 24% say NABU. Could be trusted, and NAPC and CPA. The president is believed an active combatant against corruption, 3%. General Prosecutor's Office 5%, and CU 6%, the local governments 2%. So who people believe? People believe to mass media, people believe to anti-corruption NGOs, and to some extent to NABU. That's why anti-corruption system include these bodies which are most trusted by the public. Anti-corruption bodies should have powers and legislation. We asked whether legislation should give the right to provoke bribes. You remember one masked agent provoked a bribe. 54% of respondents say that they should have the right to provoke bribes, the agents of SCU. 26% say no. So most of followers of all factions, and also followers of the president's faction, they think so. Now I'm giving the floor to the experts, our colleagues, to Mr. Mykola Khavroniuk, a representative of the Center for Political and Legal Reforms. You are welcome. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. I would like to start with the basis. Corruption is a type of crime. In order to overcome it, we should battle with it. there are 5 elements to be applied simultaneously. First is external will, pressure on relevant state bodies, on the part of our public, of external foreign international organizations. The second, the state should also be willing to become transparent and pure. The third element is legislative grounds. We have included the rules into the legislation how civil servants should act and what behavior is forbidden for civil servants. The fourth element is the measures or means to be applied in order to ensure respect to the rules. This is monitoring, control, and so on. We have this in place, but the situation is worst with the fifth element. The responsibility, the liability should be unavoidable. The two elements which we lack, this is unavoidability of liability and also internal will. They are politicians, law enforcement officers, and courts who are responsible for this internal will. So we are addressing this day these two lacking elements. We press on the regime, on the authorities, so that they understand that if they do not address the issue of cleaning their ranks, and the state will die. The fifth element would be the last dot. We see that the courts do not issue verdicts punishing the perpetrators. In general, in Ukraine, 0.5% of
no guilty verdict.
No guilty verdict. Of course, today our attention is focused on the potential establishment of the anti-corruption court, because many hopes are put on it. But when we read the bill on Supreme Anti-Corruption Court, we see that our hopes have not come true. The bill is not bad. As a lawyer, I can say this. I have been working for 15 and even 20 years with drafting of the bills. I worked in the Supreme Court. But there are two lacks. The first shortcoming is that it is 2 years late, and the second shortcoming is that the text was corrected by someone. I see this amendment that they have been included by some other persons. There are several of them. Article 7. The criteria to judges to Supreme Anti-Corruption Court, there are 20 of them, and it is impossible to apply all of them and then to find the person. It is impossible to find such a person, such an individual who will meet all the criteria. Just imagine that we have the beauty competition, and we should select persons who all of them should be blonde with black eyes, with height 180 centimeters high, and high legal education, and they also should be some mystery. And then the commission, by this criteria, check whether they meet this. They may say that there is no mystery in a person. Nobody can identify whether an individual have a mystery inside. So experience of work in foreign organization, knowledge of anti-corruption problems, everything is included into the law, but this is included in such a way that anyone can protest against the candidature and says that this candidate does not meet the criteria. The second, Article 8, Public Council of International Experts will check the candidates. Again, there's 20 criteria. And the process obviously would be not 1 month long, but longer. We do not know how many judges should be selected, because the response to this question we will get when the president would submit the next law on establishing this court. And after that, in 1 month, the number of the judges would be identified. So for several months, we will be select the candidates, but we do not know how many of them we need. For example,
So, and those 300 or 500 people who are the candidates, the Council of International Experts will assess against these 20 requirements to the candidates. Can you imagine the time in order that each candidate collected the documents, and these documents are diplomas and the declarations on assets. Each document should be thoroughly checked. And these 7 international experts, they are responsible for the results. And after this process is complete, and we do not know when it will happen, High Qualification Commission of Ukraine, they have the right to cancel the result by 5-second voting without any motives. So this is what I have said. The Commission may say that mystery is not enough in this person, for example. This person is not well qualified, or we do not trust to some ethical characteristics of this person, and so on. The next problem is that these 7 international experts should be selected by High Qualification Commission in contest from known experts, and the draft law has 15 criteria, and out of them 5 or 6 are positive and the rest are negative ones. So they should not be formally convicted. They should not work in tender committees, and during 2 years each of these 7 experts should do this work, but the draft law envisages that they should do it for free. Can you imagine this process? So people leave everything behind and they go to Ukraine, they undergo contest in order to select anti-corruption judges, and for 2 years they should work for free for Ukraine. And what about their families? And in the law it is said that the Council of the Experts, it can work based on the funds of international donors, but at the same time it is stated that they work for free. So the next problem is Article 31, changes to Criminal Procedural Code, that there is collegial consideration of all the cases, not only those cases that are considered in essence, but also some other cases when they consider complaints against judges, and we can imagine that this court has the responsibility to consider criminal proceedings according to 12 or 15 articles of the code, and we will have 30 or 40 judges, and they will work in the groups of 3, and they will be able to consider maybe 20 cases, and it is not worth creating such courts. And also there are provisional recommendations, and the first day this court is in operation, other courts that work on these cases, they should refer all the cases to this court. So manually the situation can be created. They can just send thousands of cases to this court, and minor cases, petty cases, and this court won't be able to start the consideration of top corruption cases. And here in this text also there is such a thing, if the court won't be able to form these groups of 3 judges, and if they won't be able to start this consideration, other court can do it for them, and the Kiev Appellate Court becomes this anti-corruption court. So we know that there is a powerful basis. They have a lot of judges who have been working for many years, and they will start quickly to consider these cases. And the last thing I want to say, all the system of selection of the international experts and selection of judges that will be delegated to the Supreme Anti-Corruption Court, and also the President should develop and introduce to the Supreme Council, and the Supreme Council should adopt one more law on the establishment of Supreme Anti-Corruption Court. All this procedure will take not less than a year and 2 months, even considering those characteristics that are envisaged by the draft law. So this will be in March 2019. So we should speak about compact court that will take into consideration the cases concerning top managers, and only considering Article 191, Article 368 on bribes, and those parts about big sums, and also maybe several articles more, and this court should be created immediately.
Thank you. We are giving the floor to the DEJURE Foundation Director, Mykhailo Zhernakov. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. The figures are saying for themselves. I would like to argue with Ms. Iryna, because of course there is a crisis of confidence in state institutions, but there is correlation between the results of confidence in anti-corruption bodies. Those bodies, for example, NABU, they give results, and then they are really trusted because of this. So everything depends on whether the organization gives results, give outcomes. Does fish, and when big fish is caught and then it is released, people are tired of this game, and there should be verdicts issued against corruptioners. 1.5 billion for Yanukovych funds, they have not been returned to Ukraine, and there are some achievements in this case, but they are not legitimate. The judicial reform, it has failed. First of all, this is proved by formation of the Supreme Court, where there are too many biased judges. They should be integral, but they are not. The judges who failed to explain where they were from, for what income they bought their watches, which are $30,000 or $50,000 worth. These judges became elected judges of the Supreme Court. We have drafted a report about the selection to the Supreme Court, the selection of judges. The first most important contribution to the failure of the selection process was in the rules of the selection. Let's look at the results of the Supreme Court. The heads, they elected 4 heads of cassational instances. They become heads of the same bosses who were Supreme Administrative, Supreme Economic Court heads. 3 out of 4 of them were provided bad opinions by the public NGOs. So this proves the court is not new. We have already told about the political will, and second, the most important, the bodies such as Supreme Qualification Commission and the Supreme Justice Council, they have powers to take decisions about careers of judges. 10 of 16 of them were elected. 11 out of 21 of the public council were also selected. So who are responsible for formation of the anti-corruption court? The judges. This is what Mr. Mykola said about. Out of 1,000 scores, which were the maximum score, 500 was by the Supreme Qualification Commission without any criteria and any objective assessment. This should be changed. What we see in the presidential bill, the public council, Integrity Council, which is composed of journalists and members of public. This NGO is not included, but it and so NGO's role is nivellated. So the Supreme Public Council and the judges who are not trusted by the public, they are given the powers to form an independent anti-corruption court. So this demonstrates whether the president wants to have an independent anti-corruption court. The Supreme Qualification Commission and it should be re-elected. Its composition should be changed as well as that of the second body. As concerns selection and criteria to the candidates, they should be changed, and this presidential bill should be revoked, and the bill which meets the recommendations of Venezia Commission should be submitted. Thank you very much. We give the floor to Yaroslav Yurchyshyn, Transparency International Ukraine. The opinion poll data has already been covered today. The anti-corruption court is not a panacea. In fact, this is only one of the important elements. But the sociological poll demonstrate whether the courts are combating corruption. They do not combat corruption. They should issue legitimate decisions, both guilty and non-guilty verdicts. They just should be fair. So we think that this anti-corruption court would address first professionalism problem. Very often due to many cases, so due to overloading, there are some elements which contributes to the low quality of court trials. The judge which can't explain where he gets his assets from, this judge does not seem the person who would issue a guilty verdict in a corruption case. So how he can evaluate the individual's assets in the corruption case if he can't explain the origin of his own assets? As concerns Nasirov's case, specialized anti-corruption prosecutor's office, they read 200 pages out of 800 pages, so we have already lost 1.5 months. The courts try different cases with different pace. In this case, the arguments were that they were reloaded. It is very easy to reload the court to make them try the cases within reasonable periods. The Zhernakov case has been tried in the USA for 9 years. There were some decisions, but it still continues. In Nasirov, Kulikov's prosecutor's case, they will be years long, and they will be blamed of politicization. When a top official is arrested for illegal assets, he or she always says that this is political prosecution. And the representatives of majority, they say so. They say that they are persecuted. There are some myths. There was a myth about Georgian mafia, about the attempted murder of an MP, and the cases in pro-Putin's cases, this is just my joke that there are Putin cases. After 1.5 year of considerations about the anti-corruption court, the Venice Commission was addressed. What do you think? What it would be better? It was the question to Venice Commission. They were not instructions, not directions, not the guidelines with the Venice Commission issued. It issued recommendation. The crucial role should be given. Although there are some other opinions, in particular Mr. Sergei Golovati says the crucial role should be given to international experts. Why it is logical? Because, for example, Guatemala practices demonstrate that in countries where unstable state institutions are observed, there international experts should play crucial role, but then some top officials were very upset why someone else would select the judges but not them. So taking into consideration that it is a big question whether international experts could play the role in this selection process. In Ukraine, for example, Giovanni Kessler or Mary Butler, they would not go to the post in this commission, which would be just ceremonial one, just to sign international experts would not go. They would go and they would sign only in the case there are people who are trusted. As I started with the negative news that this is not panacea, this could address the periods of consideration of trials and the quality and the better logic would be provided, but the practices demonstrate that another negative news, we would not have an anti-corruption court in 2018. This is absolutely clear, because whatever the logic, even if we do not mention the risks mentioned today, to establish a new institution, even within the limits of the already operating systems or bodies such as Specialized Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office, we need at least 6 months. The court and its jurisdiction would be broad. And if it would not address Nabu's cases, some cases from Nabu would go to the new court and some cases would go to the old court. This is a strange situation. So this way we would see where is the Kashay's death hidden. If we look into the logic, if the picture is ideal, we do not expect that the president would revoke his bill, but it seems that this person who made amendments which are very clearly seen, this individual doesn't want revocation of this bill. On 16th, the Verkhovna Rada will meet and decide whether they want the anti-corruption court, and they would vote for including this bill into the agenda. They would not do this. Because in Verkhovna Rada there are 10 deputies who fall under the jurisdiction of this court. The MPs, they would follow their interests. So the first point is to include this issue onto the agenda. If it is included, then on the 17th, the Kanzevich Anti-Corruption Committee should address this, but at their meetings, sometimes they have quorum, sometimes they do not have it. Whether the committee would consider this bill if it is not included into the agenda? No, it won't, because Ms. Ruslana is not so naive. This bill is very complicated. They would procrastinate. After 1 week, for example, if they meet, if imagine the situation is ideal, then the anti-corruption court as we need, in fact, this bill is not perfect, and it could be discussed for 6 months, for another 6 months, until another presidential election start. In theory, this law could be adopted in 6 months, but who would want to give this advantage to the president to the eve of the presidential election? So there would be year-long debates. So this individual, maybe it was Putin, who entered the amendments into this bill. This individual is interested in procrastination. In theory, the bill could be amended in the parliament, but usually everything which is amended in the parliament, it is only spoiled and becomes worse. To launch the anti-corruption court when in the parliament there are many interests which are against this. We will get the bill lodged with one concerning unbundling of the courts. So the next anti-corruption court may have no mechanism how to operate. So the situation looks very bad. The question is in articulation. Mass media should speak about this, should address this topic, so it is already that it is always in focus, because saying that this bill does not meet Ukraine's liabilities not only to its public but also to IMF. It does not meet the recommendation of the Venice Commission. It does not meet the recommendations of the EU, which is very active contributor not only by financial but also by expert resources into the anti-corruption and the judicial reforms. If we have the common position that we can better the reform. So this is a big challenge Ukraine faces. Even the most ideal bills were not ideal. And it is very easy to transform a good bill into imitation of the bill. At the lawmaking stage, we should prevent manipulation and manipulations. We should prevent manipulations and the International Expert Council should be established. Do you know why it is so titled International Expert Council? Public councils should be declared electronically. Our electronic declaration system, it does not have options, English options, so there is no opportunity for these judges to put in the data into Ukrainian system of declarations themselves. So who is this individual who amended so the bill? This is an intrigue. Every time I find something new when I read next time the bill's text. According to the Khavroniuk, we are still finding some bugs in the bills. If there is any political will in Ukraine, it is under pressure, and political will for establishing the anti-corruption court could hardly be found, but we should address this issue. We should put efforts. We should press and get high quality decisions, of course, in cases on top corruption will be issued, and this depends on us primarily.
As a sociologist, I would like to address the public. Of course, a real fight with corruption, creation of real anti-corruption court, and the efficient work of courts. All this threatened the system and some representatives of power, and I would like to stress that if the law are not adopted and if this corruption is not fought against, so this will threaten the power even more. So I live in Voskresenka region, and I visit market often, and after the Revolution of Dignity they started to speak about fighting corruption, and people asked me who was jailed, and this was for a year, and then in 2 years they started to ask, and who was jailed? And they ask it in a different tone, and then they stopped asking because they understood that no one will be jailed, and they believe that all those who are in power, they are the same, and those who are in power now can end as their predecessors. Please introduce yourself first. We have 5 minutes for questions. Andrei Megil, Institute of the Liberalism. So you said that they are the same. No, this is. I didn't say this. This is a citation. So I have a question. So what is the alternative to this draft law? What is crucial? What should be changed now in order to get results in fighting corruption? Thank you. This is a good question. So this is a work for one day. So we should implement the recommendations of the Venice Commission, as Yaroslav said, and to create the situation in which the Council of International Experts, they should have the decision that couldn't be changed for the worse by High Qualification Commission, and also what should be done in order that this court works correctly. So we should consider top corruption cases everyone knows about. They should consider cases those that are provided by NABU, but we need to have a wish to do so. So do we have time? We have 5 minutes. Anna Kalushna, 24th channel. The question is, should this draft law be voted in this wording? So the NABU, then controlling body as APO, and the court should deal in this jurisdiction. But is this legal that the court considers not all cases that are provided by them, and that this court will consider the cases of prosecutors general office? So we fear close self-sufficient system of in fighting corruption. So this this is minimal, and this is not critical, and different other important cases concerning circulation of drugs can be considered by this court, and this is not a problem, and this is not in the interest of someone in fighting this political elite. So the issue of jurisdiction here depends completely on the goal, and in this draft law it is said that only the cases where the damage to the state is more than 400 minimum salaries, so these are the big cases. So this limitation is real and acceptable under condition that the number of judges that are on this court, that they are able to deal with this number of cases. We do not know the number of judges there, and the discussion is ongoing actively. We are speaking about some figures, 40, and this will be the first instance and appellate instance. So some of them will be the judges of the appellate instance. So here is one more question mark, and so part of NABU cases won't be in this jurisdiction. This is too much. There is definition of anti-corruption cases, and there are cases concerning circulation of drugs, and this is not a case of corruption, and efficient professional consideration of cases concerning top-level corruption. And it is weird if these cases go to other courts. So there should be all cases of NABU considered, and this court will be anti-corruption court plus, and the number of judges in this court will be able to consider those cases in due terms in order not to delay the hearing of cases, because sometimes the courts are hearing different cases of different scale. So first they will consider this case. So in order to avoid this, we should clarify the jurisdiction, and whether we can work work on this draft law further, and there were situations in the parliament, and Mykola said that this can be done in one day. It can be done in the parliament, but the majority of the parliament are not interested in the anti-corruption court. Last year, the draft law was registered, and only in autumn they sent this for the consideration of the Venice Commission, so they were dealing with some other important issues for 1 year. So we spoke a lot about jurisdiction, and what about the procedure of selection? If we want the same result as we have in the Supreme Court, there are judges who committed some actions that look like crimes, and they won. So we can adopt such law if we want to have the same results as we had in that case. So if you don't have questions, so maybe final remarks from our guests. So we started the new season, and we have inspiration to fight further, and we hope that the society and the activists will continue to fight shoulder to shoulder with us.